Hello, lovers. Welcome back to the Unbroken Chain podcast. Really quick intro on this one because this episode is actually almost all me talking. In honor of the 2-year anniversary of starting this project, of making Unbroken Chain, I just wanted to take a moment to honor that journey and send a lot of love and gratitude to you listening to this. It's really become one of the great pleasures of my life to make these transmissions in all ways, from reaching out to people that I feel like the universe is putting in front of me to connect with, to putting the episodes together and hearing back from some of you about how these teachers have helped unlock new perspectives and, as they do for me, shift some of my patterns of suffering and open up more space in myself for connection and joy, especially in times when we're so aware of all the disconnection in the world. So thank you for being here. This conversation I recorded last week with Daniel, my partner, and I welcome you into our kitchen. Come sit at the table with us. If you're interested, on Instagram and on my website, you can find a very short little video that Daniel made from the hang. He recorded the conversation on film as well, and I'm sharing a video of a story that I tell at the very end about a recent experience with some teachers I encounter through mushrooms, through plant medicine. So if you want to see my face too, you can find me in all the usual places, maurajames.com and Instagram, Maura James. I love you so very much, and I'm glad to be here with you.
What I'm really curious about, and I feel like I know bits and pieces of where your heart was at 2 years ago, like around the time that we started to really connect. I think there was a time before that, just before that, when you, like, big changes were already happening to you, but meaning like you needed to kind of step into the driver's seat, I guess literally, get in a car and, hit the road for an entire summer. Is that what led to the podcast? Or is that something that was always kind of inside of you, like rolling around, like ideas of doing something like this?
Well, I think more and more I'm realizing how everything that I am today has been latent in me, since Eric came with me and I had it all in there in my child spirit. But I think because what I do, which I think of now as storytelling, isn't necessarily honored or like manifested in this culture in a way that made sense to me, that I saw a lot of examples of. I think it's taken me a while to realize that all the things that I do, all the things that I love, uplifting stories, spending time with people that don't usually have visibility in our culture, that all of that has been in me from the beginning. And it's what I think I'm good at and why I'm here on Earth this time around. So at that period 2 years ago, I came out of a relationship and was in like deep heartbreak. Not just the heartbreak of the relationship not working out, but it was a really challenging relationship where I came out of it feeling very broken and very disconnected from my sense of self and purpose and worth. And a lot of the stories that were implanted in me during that relationship were about how it made me very dependent on that relationship. It was very isolating, and leaving it felt like I had zero community. I had zero access to the creative projects that I'd been working on collaboratively. And not only that, but the message was like, you don't know, you can't do this on your own, basically. And obviously, like, I called that relationship in at that time in my life because I needed to learn a lot of lessons. And one of those was like leaving it and proving to myself that I can do it, making things on my own terms. And that was just colliding generally with, at that point, I'd been in New York for 10 years. I'd been working in production for maybe 5 of those years, like producing other people's projects, which was an incredible education. Like, I didn't go to school for film. I just got hired by someone who saw potential in me and was like, you can produce. I was like, what? And I learned by doing it, which was such a gift. But at that time in my life, I think I was coming to the end of that being a fruitful exchange, a helpful way for me to learn in the world by facilitating other people's projects. And I'd put in a lot of time at that point on projects where I was extracting capital from the machine and I was like paying my bills. But in terms of the signal I was putting out in the world, I was making, like, for example, I worked on a History Channel reality TV show for a good part of a year. I don't really believe in that product that I put out in the world, like how reality TV functions in a lot of people's lives. The story was one of those like unsolved murder stories, which is just like putting murder and violence into people's consciousness. It was a time in my life where I was like, I need to make things on my own terms. I need to harness all these skills that I've been developing as a producer, as an assistant camera person, really just getting my hands in all parts of the process. And I need to tell stories that I believe can bring people together and heal people. And at that point, like, I needed to heal myself. I felt so broken and alone that the only way I knew how to be okay was to throw myself so hard into the void, into the world, that I was demanding of the universe that it catch me and show me that I wasn't alone. And that happened in such a magical way. Like, I drove across country and I didn't really have a plan. I had a first place to stop in North Carolina. And after that, I was staying with people that I met along the way. I started out with my dear friend Maddie. We were in a van together. And then after that, I rented a car and just really let the universe show me. And people opened their homes to me and fed me, and I played with their kids. And it was like the most intense healing process. And the podcast came out of that. It came out of me wanting to share the love that I had found in the world with people, and also just a recognition there are a lot of us that feel deeply alone at times. Even people in relationships can feel so alone and stuck. And I believe that foundationally, as human incarnates, we are not alone. We are all part of the same project here. And for me, vulnerability, transparency, the quality of like listening and receptivity have been total game changers for me. And it was like, okay, how do I amplify the signal of listening? How do I send that out into the world? It's a receptive action. How do I transmit that? And the podcast became a really low barrier to entry, democratic way to explore putting that signal out, at the same time as sharing just this bounty of wisdom and love that was coming my way so quickly I could barely like hoover it all up.
That's great.
That's where it started.
That's great. So you throw yourself out into the world in this way, drive across country and not know where you're going to stay, and just sort of meeting strangers and trusting that they're going to let you in, not just into their homes, but into their hearts. Like, you're going to spend quality time with them. You're going to be with them for several days or weeks. I've certainly traveled around this country, and I've met so many strangers that have either become friends or just become, really beautiful teachers in my life. And some of those trips were solo by myself, some of them were with other friends. You doing this solo and just meeting people along the way that you have no idea when they're going to come into your life, and then you end up putting a microphone in front of them. Was that scary? Has that been scary at times, like doing that? Or have you just been trusting that process? Because a lot of folks do podcasts and bless them. They do podcasts with folks who have some sort of credentials and in society and been given to them by institutions. And hey, that's great. Love those folks too. But I think from the beginning, I noticed that you seem to be on a path of like, I want to give a microphone to any person. And I know that can be challenging to just trust that those people are going to show up. They're going to continue to show up if you put yourself out there.
Kind of, but also in my experience, once I opened myself to the possibility that everyone is a teacher, it came in faster than I could hold on to it. Like, I really believe that each one of us has a tremendous wealth of tools and wisdom and perspective just because we've lived our own lives and we've learned to survive our own lives. And, you know, it's funny, like I went to an Ivy League university. I've been privileged to have an incredible education. Like I loved school because for the most part, I went to incredible schools. I went to an all-women's high school in Portland, Oregon that like was so formative to my life in all ways. I'm so grateful for that part of my life. But a big part of my journey has been kind of learning to turn down the volume in my brain and like turn up the volume in my heart. And in that process, I think I learned to reorient my looking to institutions for authority in pretty much every part of my life. And that involves wisdom too. Like people have shown me again and again that sort of the library at which I want to sort of humble myself and study is lived experience, is people. I mean, that's where Unbroken Chain is the name of a Grateful Dead song that's meaningful to me, but it's also the idea that like because we are here in this moment alive, we are part of an unbroken lineage of survival wisdom, of information about what it means to be human. And in this particular moment in time, in this particular culture, we're very divorced from that and have been taught to look to these institutions. But as we can see all of that kind of crumbling around us, it's like, what's left? Well, each other. And Georgia O'Keeffe, who's been a really formative goddess in my pantheon, said once, I've been absolutely terrified every day of my life, and I've never let it stop me from doing a single thing I wanted to do. And I feel that. Like I don't feel fear at a conscious level very often. It certainly comes roaring through about specific things, but I don't live with low-grade fear anymore because I just decided not to give that voice room in my life, not to take up space in my consciousness. I can't afford it. There's too much I want to do here, you know, to like barter with that voice. I just decided not to trust that as like a valid viewpoint. It's funny because, I mean, I feel like already I'm like ready to give psychedelics a lot of credit for this because I actually grew up with like crippling social anxiety. I didn't talk on the telephone really until my early 20s when I got a job in production. It was like, well, this is your job, is to talk to people. And I had to just decide to show up to that. But I remember when I was younger, like missing play dates because my mom would be like trying to help me get over it, be like, you have to speak on the phone about this. And I just wouldn't do it. And so I wouldn't have the play date. I don't know what it was, something about the world expecting something from me that I couldn't be, or I don't know. But on the other side of psychedelics, after I kind of made peace with being uncomfortable, being okay, stopping needing to like arrange my life to be comfortable for me, that really blew open the door with people. And yeah, just trusting that whoever I'm with, whatever situation I'm with, is the relationship that I'm being asked to work with. You know, I think Ram Dass uses the expression, the yoga of relationships. It's like, well, I'm here with these people right now. How can I make this my teacher? How can I make this experience these people? And once I opened myself to that, I was like, holy shit, people have a lot of really good ideas. Yeah, there's so many people on the podcast that are like, this is the best little Trojan horse for me to get into people's intimate spaces, literally their homes, but their souls and hearts. And like, oh my God, I've received so much from people whose words and presence like still deeply shape the way that I live my life. What was the question? Oh, I thought it was scary. Yeah, no, it's just fun.
You answered, yeah.
Yeah, it's just fun. I'm really humbled too, especially because I've sought out mostly women. Women are so fucking dope and they want to collaborate. Like women are the human version of the mycelial wisdom of mushrooms. There is a subterranean network of women from the beginning of time looking out for each other, holding their families together, connecting their communities, exchanging information and resources in a mutual aid kind of way that has nothing to do with capitalism. Like that is my understanding of divine feminine spirit. And so many women that I've reached out to who have been so open to sharing, that's amazing to tap into. And it really, I feel like it called me into my own confidence as a woman too, because I think growing up with a really powerful mom who really scared me for the most part, and then feeling my feeling that inside of me I avoided that for a long time. It felt dangerous and bad. And I've only ever had, like in high school and college, I would have like one good female friend. In college, I really didn't have any. I had a partner, a male partner. And in that time when I left and started this project 2 years ago, when I felt so broken and so alone, I was just like, I need women in my life. I need to learn some spider magic. And yeah, hell yeah, that's happened.
Yeah, so before you left to take this journey across country and seek out women, seek out a new path, you had just spent almost a decade at that point in New York, but you had come from basically high school to New York City and been in some relationships, right? You know,
did a lot of drinking.
Like, what did that process take to get you to the place where when this relationship ended and you hit the road, that felt right? That felt like, I'm ready to step out.
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you alluded to psychedelics, but I mean, I'm sure throughout your 20s, I'm sure
what tools have helped me break out?
Yeah, what was that experience like in New York City that put you in position at some point to say, I need to get out of the city? You know, not because you don't have love for the city, but just it didn't feel like the path anymore.
Well, I mean, I guess another thing about me that I'm realizing is that as a kid, I was there are plenty of labels that could be put on, I think, my sensory experience of the world, my consciousness, whether it's like a highly sensitive person or an empathetic person or a cancer or Asperger's, autism spectrum. Like, there's a lot of lenses I could be used. But basically, I spent the first 5 years of my life totally overwhelmed by the world. Like, I would go into meltdown if my mom wanted me to wear a shirt with a turtleneck or tights that had a seam on them. Literally, I remember missing days of kindergarten because I would have a meltdown and never be able to recover. And I've heard so many stories about the screaming that I would do, to the point where my mom would just put me in the basement and close the door, because it's funny, I can still kind of tap into that feeling of rage. It's kind of like feral, wild animal. And her assessment was that I wasn't ready to be in this world. That's what it felt like to her, interfacing with me as a child. And I think in a way that's really true. And sometimes I experience that now with psychedelics. Like the other weekend when I took a lot, I just had this feeling of each moment is so disgustingly, overwhelmingly alive. And sometimes I experience it as invading my consciousness. It's too much light and sound and smell. And so it's funny that I ended up being drawn to live in New York City, which is that. It is too muchness. It's constant sirens. It's people all around. It's very obvious suffering in your face. Every day, just, walking to work, I'm passing people who are clearly struggling with housing issues or addiction issues. And it's just a lot to process all the time. But I think it actually taught me really incredible tools in terms of well, I can't keep it out. I'm in the vortex. I am the vortex. The vortex is inside of me, clearly. So it's I had to learn how to be a vessel for it rather than getting totally destroyed by the vortex, So yeah, New York was an incredible teacher, and I'm really grateful that I learned the tools to navigate that. Similarly to working in production, which is just such a grind, just insane hours. As a producer, you're keeping track of all the details all the time, problem solving moment to moment when things go wrong. And it's amazing. It showed me how capable I am. But at some point I was what is this all in service of? And a project I was working on at that time was a documentary filming in rural Georgia, where the guy I was working with at the time and I would go a couple times a year. And I noticed every time I would come back to the city, driving back in, I felt this whoa, back into the vortex kind of energy, and then it would just envelop me, and I wouldn't have the perspective to even see that I was inside it anymore. But those experiences popping out of the vortex just made me realize I need some teachers I need to talk to trees. I need to learn from the soil. It's really difficult to do here in the city. But some of the tools that I'd already started working on, so I went to Peru in 2014 to sit and drink ayahuasca for the first time. I went to a place called Temple of the Way of Light, where you sit for 7 nights over 10 days. I mean, that was like a hard reset in so many ways. I came back and ran my first marathon after that, which is something I never, ever, ever thought that I was a person who could do. But it actually really went really well, hand in hand with a lot of the tools I came out of that ayahuasca experience with, because so much of it was about being with my breath, being in a moment, even if it's uncomfortable, enduring, witnessing myself rather than like feeling like drama is happening to me, like, oh, it's hot, oh, I'm in pain, but just observing. And yeah, running became a huge mental health thing for me. I think I just run hot in general, like that vortex I was talking about being inside of me. Sometimes I just need to go out there and like get 10 miles out. Otherwise, if I'm at home at night trying to go to bed and there's 10 miles inside of me that I didn't run, it's like, you better bet that's gonna make me feel insane. So yeah, long distance running basically brought meditation into my life in a really helpful way. And yeah, psychedelics, like I obviously talk about that a lot on the podcast because I owe a lot of my mental health and appreciation for being human to my psychedelic experiences. And I went pretty much from zero to ayahuasca. I didn't ever have psychedelic experiences in sort of like a party context. I was just handed a paradigm in Peru that was like, this is a hospital. You're here for healing. This is a healing modality. It's not a magic pill. It's not going to do the work for you, but it is going to open up the doors and show you where you have work to do in your life. It's going to make conscious the unconscious that's driving your life. And at that point in my mid-20s, I was a very frustrated person that really judged the shit out of myself. And I didn't like being with myself. And so I was doing everything I could to avoid having to be with myself. That looked like a lot of binge watching, binge eating, binge jerking off, and drinking. Yeah, like alcohol at that point was how I was coping with social anxiety. And it was getting to the point by my mid-20s, certainly through college and in the years afterwards, where I had a very hard time not blacking out every time I would drink. I just had no ability to moderate. It felt like alcohol was this magical way that I could feel okay with myself and that I could feel sexy and funny and flirty. It's too bad in that way that alcohol is promoted as the tool to do that, because it's such a liar. It's such an illusion. And once I came back from the jungle the first time and had so much more compassion for myself and understanding of why I was using alcohol in that way, it just lost its allure. I was like, no, I want to I want to be able to hang out with myself. I want to show up to this moment with like my buddy. And I can't do that when I'm putting shit in my body that poisons me, feels like poison, or makes me do things that I don't stand by. Like, what is that? I can't. It just became untenable to make choices that I couldn't stand by. I couldn't afford it in my soul anymore. And that's what a lot of the social anxiety comes from, I think, is like being in a room and not liking who I'm showing up as and not knowing how to be anybody else. And so I started being able to show up in rooms as I was, and also being okay if it was uncomfortable or awkward. Not taking on responsibility for the awkwardness or uncomfortableness in the world. It's okay, here we are. Oh, we're still here. Oh, we're still here. And that's so much of the experience of a psychedelic trip, is like, oh, this is really uncomfortable. Oh, you don't want to be here? Well, here we are. Oh, here we still are. And after a while, I stopped dreading it and just being like, no, I know that I'll just still be sitting there on my mat, you know?
You mean when the trip, the psychedelic journey can kind of get intense.
Yeah,
and uncomfortable. Like if you're in the jungle, you're sitting around a fire, you might be around strangers, you might be around friends, you might even be alone. I'm sure you've done some. I know you've done some by yourself. I feel that too. It's like there's moments where it's really intense and you just have to breathe and trust that you're going to be okay, and that on the other side of this is going to be so much healing and so much understanding of, I don't know, yourself in a much deeper way, and so much more confidence built in what you are capable of doing. It's like a big challenge, right? It's like, can I get through this? And I know a lot of people might hear that and be like, oh, that just sounds crazy. Like, why would I go through that? Like, there's a lot of good stuff in there too. You know, it's not just like it's going to be really painful and sad. It's also going to be extraordinarily beautiful and soul giving in so many ways. But yeah, like you going down there to do it in that time, to let go of some of that stuff, that's hard. That's hard work, to like look at the fact that you have been drinking this much for these reasons, or eating this way for these reasons. I used alcohol the same way in my mid to late 20s, early 30s even. Just, it was, like you said, it was a way to be around people and be comfortable with myself, because I hated myself. And so, yeah, I had to drink. I had to drink to go be around people and feel good about myself. And then that, of course, led to treating people the way I don't want to treat them, treating my own body the way I don't want to treat my body. I know that's something that you and I connected on, the giving up of those things. I mean, I feel like I could have a drink. You know, I can do that. Very rarely. It very rarely
we tried to the other day, and we just couldn't even make it happen.
We're trying to have a drink from time to time, and I'll get halfway through one and just think, I just don't want this. Like, I don't care about this. It's not, and that's fine. I mean, I had plenty of years where it was fun, and it was crazy and stupid, you know. And I think my body's like, hey, you're good. You're fine. You don't need this.
I just know it won't take me where I want to go. My body knows that, so.
Yeah. Well, and eating too, because I know for me, I smoked cigarettes for a while. Like, I just loved tobacco ever since I was in my teens. You know, a pipe or a cigar from time to time. Like, I love those things, but it got to a point where it kind of took over my life for a little while. Caused a lot of depression that was already there, just kind of was a weight pushing it down further. So when I let go of alcohol and cigarettes in a big way, it made more sense to change my eating habits. Like, I'm more in control of my decisions, I feel like. I'm seeking out ways to make my body feel better, because my body's actually telling me things that are getting through what actually feels good to put in there. And I know that you went through that as well with your diet.
It's ongoing. Yeah, I want to touch on something you talked about a minute ago, though, about when psychedelic trips can be really overwhelming. Because I think sometimes when I talk to people who are considering it for the first time, or at the beginning of that journey, there can be a lot of fear of like having a quote-unquote bad trip. And the paradigm that I was given by the Shipibo practitioners in Peru is that there's no such thing as a bad trip or a good trip. Everything is experience. All experience is welcome. Can you be curious about the experience? Can you witness the experience rather than reacting to it? That doesn't mean that there aren't challenging trips. There are absolutely challenging trips. I remember one night in the jungle, the guy on the mat next to me, it's really dark and you can't really see anything, but you can hear what's going on in the room with everybody. And the guy right next to me sounded like he was being tortured for most of the night. And the next morning, everybody kind of gathers and people look various degrees of like beaten or, you know, floaty. And he's just kind of there, like, hanging his head. And I was like, how you doing? That sounded like a really intense night. And he was like, you know, I spent hours in hell. I thought I was going to be there forever. And then I suddenly realized I invented this. I invented hell. And as soon as I realized that, I was free. It's like what I realized in psychedelic experiences, especially the most challenging ones, is like we're operating in those hells all the time in our regular life. And it's not that the mushrooms or the ayahuasca are giving you a bad trip. No, they're just showing you what frequencies are on your radio at all times and bringing it to the surface where you're like, this is fucking hell. And then you can deal with it and choose to turn off that dial. And so, yeah, it can't, like, I understand people's fear about having to deal. Absolutely. Like, it's hard, you know, during that trip the other weekend, at one point I was just like, baby, mushrooms are hard work, especially when you take a lot of them. Yeah. But it's like, we're kidding ourselves if we don't think that we're having that, quote, bad trip in our sober waking lives. Mm-hmm. And really, it's such a gift to have an opportunity to, like, grab a hold of it and purge it from our systems. So that can be stuff that we're doing to cope. It can be trauma that happened to us in the past, stories that we're carrying around about who we are. We're living all of that all the time, and it's coming out of us in how we engage in our environment. And it's not the medicine that's doing it to us, to you. It's just revealing the programming. And in the jungle, one of the things that somebody asked before our first ceremony, like, what do you do? What do you recommend shamans when it's really challenging? And one of them said, in Spanish, but they translated it for us. Actually, not Spanish, Shipibo. He said, focus more. That was his response. And I really have found that, like, especially in ayahuasca, but really in any medicines, I'm at my best when I'm sitting up straight, when my spine is straight, when my eyes are closed, and when I'm just breathing. Sometimes I lay down. I think of it as getting in the spaceship, and I just have my arms by my sides and I lay really still. That was another thing about being a kid, just my physical body. I could not keep still, just constantly fidgeting. And after ayahuasca, I think I became a pretty calm, still person physically, because I found that a lot easier. Because the fidgeting comes from like, uncomfortable, gonna change this. Over here, and I'm always like changing and trying to get comfortable. And when it is so intense and so overwhelming in a trip that you barely feel like you can breathe, it's just like you're not a person, you're just falling through the universe, there's always something to come back to. There actually always is. And it's your breath, my breath. Mm-hmm. And that is such an anchor. And it feels like a life raft, in those moments when you rediscover it. And for me, being absolutely still, that's focusing. That's focus more. It's like, I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to try to adjust my physical or emotional situation. I'm just going to breathe. And in that comes the most exquisite peace and calm and reassurance. And I know people come to that through a lot of different portals. Meditation is a big one. Dear friends of mine who have very active Buddhist practices, like, I think they know how to find that. Long distance runners. But for me, it took psychedelics to like force me to be perfectly still in mind, body, and soul, to realize that was always available to me. Always, always. So being overwhelmed by the world has stopped being something that I feel like I'm a victim of, an assault, and more, it's an indication to me that I need to reach into my toolkit and get still and listen in whatever form, running, communing with cannabis in an intentional way, sitting, meditating, whatever.
Getting out into the woods.
Yeah. Not looking at a screen. Yeah. Having sex.
Yeah. Very healing.
But yes, changing the way I eat came with all of this too, which is really ongoing for me, because eating is something that, if you're an alcoholic and you choose to deal with that by abstaining, you can create a universe where you don't have alcohol around you. I need to eat every day. And I need to engage with my phone every day, usually for work and for the things that I want to make. So it's really forcing me. I can't deal with either of those things by being like just shutting them out. It's really forcing me to look at my relationship to them and being like, am I creating an abusive relationship built on avoiding things, resisting things? And when I stopped eating meat and dairy, breaking up with cheese was really emotional, and it forced me to start changing my relationship to food from an emotional comfort-seeking thing to how am I nourishing this vessel that's on loan to me in this lifetime. And it's still ongoing. Like, I can still measure my mental health by how I'm abusing food. Like, we eat really well. We don't eat processed food. We don't eat a lot of sugar. But I still can find myself, binging on whatever, like binging on cashews, and just... that's an important way for me to check in with myself and be like, okay, what am I trying not to feel right now? What's actually going on here? Because it's just about turning myself off when I'm using my phone or food in that way. So it's ongoing, but realizing that I didn't want to be part of suffering, and that not eating meat and dairy was like a really easy way for me to just make a big step in that direction. I was like, yeah, it's time for this. I've eaten a lot of meat and dairy in my life, and I'm ready to find better ways to engage.
Yeah, and I think I've seen a lot of growth in you based on how your diet has shifted, how you've sought out the foods that are going to help you feel stronger and more connected to your body. And that process, that growth that I'm talking about, isn't always easy. Sometimes I can feel like in our relationship, like I just sense like you're going through rough patches where your body is feeling rough, and that takes a toll on you mentally. And so your availability for me or for our partnership can be challenging at times. And
how do you experience that? Just like me not being available to connect?
Yeah, I mean, part of it too is I know that you need time to be alone, just like all of us do. I think whether we realize that or not. I'm a people person. I do love being around people, but when I go and separate myself from people for a day or sometimes 2 days by going out and being in the woods alone, or going on a long drive or a long run or walk by myself, I feel the importance of that, that I need time to process. And especially if you're dealing with something that's really difficult, whether that's your body being in pain or, relationships that are struggling around you, that maybe there's wounds there that you need space on your own to heal from, and you don't need someone constantly telling you like, I'm here, just talk to me, just be with me. Like, I'm learning from you that it's okay to give you the space to be strong on your own, because you are. Like, you continually show me that you can get through a lot of things on your own, and that you appreciate me more when I give you that space. Like, it's like I get it. I get it, but it's really beautiful. It's really teaching me to be quiet and listen, not only to you, because you may not be offering me anything, but for me to listen to myself. Like, what I don't have to step in here and be like the hero of a situation because you seem to not be having a good day. It's like, you need to sit with it. You need to be with that frustration or hurt or whatever it is. And you always come back around. You always come back around, and you seem stronger.
Thank you for being patient. Yeah. As you know, I have pretty big waves, and I'm going to start crying. For a long time, felt like that meant that something was like really wrong and broken. And it also reminded me of my mom and how scary that was and hard to deal with as a kid. And I've been really afraid of that part of myself. Also because it's like when I'm in those low spots and I'm disconnected, even though I have the perspective now to be able to say, oh, wow, look at that. You're in a low spot. You feel disconnected. You feel a little apocalyptic about the world and all your relationships. That doesn't mean that I feel better. It just means I'm able to see it. And so I think I'm coming into a new season of my life where I can, I guess, accept that seems to be part of my journey in this particular genetic package this time. And I think your ability to see it and to have patience with it and to love me even when I don't want to be really connected with you, because you trust that will help me come back on my own terms, like that has helped me trust and accept it inside of myself. And that's actually accelerated my ability to recover from it, I think, because shaming myself for it just like keeps me trapped there. I mean, I'm just like learning how to be in a relationship with you, with anyone, period. But I'm definitely learning how to at least communicate with you. Like, hey, I acknowledge that I'm not doing well right now. I'm sorry. I love you. I'll see you on the other side. Rather than just reacting from that place of disconnection. And I've really learned to stop making decisions when I'm feeling that way, which has been really huge. Like when things feel really apocalyptic and hard and I'm like, I need to take the reins here and like fix things. I think now I just know, like, not right now. Yeah, you can do that, but we're going to wait until you're in a better place. And when I'm in a better place, usually there's a kernel of truth in like what's sent me down the rabbit hole, and I can work with it in a way that's not destructive to my life, you know. I'm learning. Thank you.
Me too. Me too.
So much of this all is just about learning to like respect and love the human incarnation that I'm in this time around, you know. Psychedelics helped me see that I'm not my body and that I'm not even my thoughts. And they also helped me say, they are my lens, they are my vessel for this experience. And so what are you going to do with it? How are you going to make that the most cool art project that you possibly can in your lifetime? How can your life be such an awesome canvas? And, you know, I have so much body shame, which is funny because I grew up, you know, my dad wasn't around, so it was like I have 2 sisters and a mom, like a lot of woman power, a lot of great stories. My mom didn't let us watch Disney because she was like, fuck the princess that needs to be saved narrative. You know, I read a lot of books about like True Confessions of Charlotte Doyle, you know, that my mom also didn't want us to read books like Curious George because she was like, that's a boy book and it's about how little boys are naughty and that's okay. You know, that society will think that that's cute if it's a little boy doing it, little white boy, let's be honest. So even given how amazing my inputs were as a kid, this culture got in hard, and I really hated myself and hated my body and thought that I was fat and not sexy and needed to do XYZ things, which always involved berating myself about needing to lose weight and look a certain way. So I think psychedelics helped me go from like, what does my body look like, and comparing it to cultural standards and other women, to like, how do I feel inside this vessel? How can I express myself through this meat body? That's given me so much love and appreciation for how well it does work, you know? I'm so lucky for all these parts, and that's opened a lot of space in my life, letting go of some of that. Again, ongoing project, but I trekked the Himalayas by myself with a 19-year-old Nepalese woman who didn't speak very much English, and I do not speak Nepalese, so we had a really sweet, mostly nonverbal 10 days together hiking. And, you know, I would pass these like old women, tiny women with these huge baskets tied around their back filled with wood that they were gathering for the day just to live their lives and have a heated house for their families. And I was like, whoa. Here I am, a white girl showing up from America being like, I'm trekking the Himalayas with my trekking backpack, and I'm challenging myself to put in 12 miles a day at this vertical climb, and here's this woman who's just living her fucking life. And I was like, we're having such different experiences of our bodies in this lifetime. I don't depend on my physical strength for my survival every day, and there are a lot of people who do. There's so many luxuries that I'm just disrespecting by hating my body because of the way my thighs look. Are you kidding me? Get out of here. I don't got time for that anymore.
Yeah, they look great.
Thanks, baby.
Yeah, but then, I see what you're saying on many levels. One that comes to mind is just being able also to see everyone as beautiful too.
Yeah.
Just seeing the beauty in every person, being able to see them as you can be so challenging to get there when all of these awful things are happening in the world and are caused by a lot of people. But to be able to kind of blow past a lot of that stuff, and see the root of someone, see their heart and know that they're just like you. They just have, like you said, just a different story. They're just using their bodies in different ways. And
it's a form of magic to speak to the part of people that is underneath all the trauma and all the stuff that's happened to them. To speak to people from the place of like, I trust your wholeness, even whether or not people feel it in themselves sometimes, just to speak to the part of them that is capable of being whole and healed. And if the people that have done that for me have absolutely saved my life. And when I'm able to move through the world in a way where I'm meeting people and we're meeting each other, sometimes for very brief periods of time, like when I'm filming, like learning how to go up to somebody with a camera and just talk to that part of a person, like it's magic. It really is. And it reminds both me and I think the other person of our capacity to be anything. And that's what it takes when you feel stuck in loops of dysfunction or being somebody that you don't want to feel. It's like to have somebody open the door to just like, what if you're not that? What if you're not all the things that you think you are? What if you're not lazy? What if you're not a failure? I'm going to talk to the part of yourself that's perfect and whole. It's such an honor to have the opportunity to do that with people.
And you do it so well. I want to say that so many of the episodes throughout the last 2 years have really changed my life. I mean, being able to listen to women in this intimate way, you know, they're being really vulnerable with you. You're being very vulnerable with them. To be able to sit in on that, it's so powerful for someone like myself to like hear these stories and these perspectives that I haven't really heard before. Maybe because of how I was raised or just whatever my life has looked like. My path hasn't always put me in those rooms to hear those stories. I'm so grateful to you and these other women and men who've been on the podcast who really have so much wisdom to pass off. I mean, there's just so much. And to have other folks in my life, other men telling me like I haven't been able to connect with my feminine side, and now listening to women of color, you know, women who have a completely different background, you know, are teaching me so much about who I am and that I've got so much to learn as like a male in this day and age.
I mean, I think you're speaking to something that white people are having a real come to Jesus moment with right now, which is just the realization that we have not been in on so many conversations, that we've mostly been in rooms with other white people, and that we're missing out on huge swaths of the human experience. I mean, last night we were watching those New York Times shorts of women of color and indigenous people just talking about their experience of racism. And it's just, I mean, I'm continually like humbled and mind blown. First of all, at how much I don't know. And then also by people that are willing to share themselves in a culture that has historically made them feel like their perspective does not matter and something's wrong with them. And we prefer that they just kind of disappear. So anybody that's willing to be transparent with me in these conversations or in the world in any kind of way, I find that so motivating. Of course, I'd love to be part of that.
Yeah, so what does it feel like to be a white woman? And what does it feel like to be a white woman in the year 2020?
It's pretty embarrassing. I think just whiteness is pretty embarrassing. Yeah, I mean, it's good to be forced to look at the fact that I am a white woman. The privilege of whiteness is that I don't deal with that consciously, haven't for most of my life. And so, yeah, it's good to check in with that. And, yeah, I'm just continuing to try to learn and to use my powers as a storyteller to amplify stories that I believe in. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with like talking to people that have been surviving America in really creative, powerful, beautiful ways because they've had to. And there's so much to be honored there. I do feel very aligned with my womanness. I do identify really strongly with woman spirit and have a lot of, like I was saying, Georgia O'Keeffe, just so many women, internal teachers across time and space, Assata Shakur and Frida Kahlo, Leonora Carrington, Nellie Bly, like these women who really entered my imagination when I was pretty young and just showed me what it means to be independent and to do the right thing as I understand it and know it in my heart. It's always been a very rebellious thing to me to be a woman, a wild woman. I've always known that and known that that was my path.
I guess society makes it kind of hard to be a wild woman sometimes.
Yeah, but I feel pretty disconnected from society's expectations at this point. I just don't check in with that really anymore. I don't even know what society expects of a woman in 2020.
Yeah, the embarrassment, being white. I guess it doesn't have to be that, right? I mean, we can still love ourselves. We can still acknowledge that there's a lot of room to grow and not just... Because I guess that word embarrassing can turn into...
like shame.
Shame, yeah.
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 Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's not, I don't think shame is helpful at all. I don't think people of color want white people to walk around feeling guilty. I don't think that serves them or serves the situation either. So it's just an indication that there's work to do. I think that that feeling of shame is like, oh shit, this is on the table now for, guidance in my life to deal with this. And yeah, what a pleasure to have the zeitgeist right now be about listening and learning. Awesome. That's great. Yeah. It's interesting with like medicine, or even just with the vision that we have right now of finding a rural property and building up a retreat space and a sanctuary space where people can come. I never expected to be in the American South for any extended period of time, let alone like looking for a property to potentially live down here long term. But I've definitely come to a place of acceptance that that's sort of a call to service of like, well, here we are. Here the opportunities have been coming our way. Here we've been creating community and meeting people. And I feel how deep the wounds are in this part of the country, in the whole country, but just a lot of blood shed on this soil. You know, we're living in an area where the Muskogee Creek were kicked out. There was a genocide of indigenous people here. There was slavery here. Like, those ghosts are lived out through modern culture in really dysfunctional ways, as we all know. And so it's like, if I believe in medicine and medicine accessibility, like this seems like a place to put that signal out. That said, I also understand that people of color may not want to engage with white practitioners, and that makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm also kind of like, okay, clearly white people have perpetuated a lot of harm and violence, which is a sign of our own trauma and dysfunction. So I'm like, okay, how do I make medicine accessible to people of color? And how do I like work with the people that the white people to be like, how can we heal not only our own trauma, but also the ways that we're like blasting trauma out into the world? I feel like I'm in a period of learning about that. Like, what does it mean to deepen psychedelic practice in the context of racism as a white person? Because I believe in these tools, and I believe that they should be available to the most vulnerable and the most oppressed. And I have deep concerns about the way the psychedelic renaissance is unfolding right now in regards to the same people that have access to the best of Western medicine, that there's gatekeeping happening so that they're the only ones that have access to the best of psychedelia as it is legalized, which is really why I don't care very much about medicalization of psychedelics as the only pathway to legalization. I think that's just more gatekeeping. I think these plants grow out of the ground, and they're asking to have an intimate relationship with you and you and you and you. And for anybody to put themselves in the middle of that relationship, even if they're saying it's under the auspices of safety, get out of here. Who are you? Get out of here.
Yeah, cultures have been doing this safely for thousands of years.
Yeah. And those same gatekeepers are the ones that are responsible for like the Tuskegee experiments, you know, where black men were infected with syphilis or not treated for syphilis without their consent. Like, there's a good reason why people of color would be suspicious of those same institutions now being the gatekeepers for psychedelics. So yeah, I'm just a big believer, and I'm putting some devotion into the expansion of accessibility of psychedelics in a way that also actually is psychedelic and has a possibility to really change systems, including racism and patriarchy. And it ain't gonna happen if it's funneled through those same systems.
What should it go through? How do we honor the cultures that this medicine is sort of sprung forth from?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately in regards to Toad, which has been such a powerful healer in my life, and I know yours now. And it's super not sustainable. You know, there's a limited number of toads hopping around the Sonoran Desert, and now that people like Mike Tyson are blasting out the signal that this medicine is life-changing, like, a lot of people want to get on board. And it's going to disappear. We're going to colonize that medicine the way we've colonized the land. So I'm really interested in ways of engaging that are sustainable. And to that end, I think mushrooms, psilocybin, seem to be a really good option just in terms of teachers to work with, because they are abundant and they are easily cultivated. But I think it's also really important that white people come to it from a place of like not trying to be shamans, but trying to be white people that are working with a plant, and or trying to be humans that are working with a plant. Like shamanism has a lineage. If you're not in and of that lineage, you're not a shaman. And that's okay. Like my transmission from the plants is not like get away white people. My transmission, like from being in the jungle, the plants and the Shipibo, the people there are like, clearly you guys are the ones with the issues. Y'all are the ones living in these cities that are making you insane. Like there's a reason that those plants are finding you. They do want to help you for the good of all of us, for the good of all the plants and all of creation. Like white people culture is sick culture. And so if the plants can help, which I understand them as wanting to do, they are here for us. So it's not about like white people shouldn't be doing plant medicine just because indigenous cultures have been the keepers of those lineages. But it does mean we have to enter those spaces with understanding of where we've come from and where those people have come from and those teachings. So, yeah, I mean, working with Oso over the last several years, my teacher in Connecticut, who grew up in Mexico in a family of curanderas and then was adopted by the Lakota in the States in his teens. Like, I just like being around him because I learn so much from the way he is in the world. And absolutely the way that he holds ceremony and the way that he understands the relationship between people and plants and the universe. And I'm not trying to like learn his way so that I can replicate it. I'm just trying to learn his way so that I learn to better listen to the wisdom inside of me, you know? And lately I've been curious about my Celtic heritage and saying like, okay, I feel a lot of connection to that land. The wisdom is in that land. I think it's important to connect with Native American wisdom if we're living on lands where that is the wisdom. We live in America, like we need to know about that. But also like what is the wisdom that's in my genetics and in my DNA and in the land of that place where a lot of those people and that DNA came from. And I feel that in Ireland where, you know, I think up the line, like there were some pretty powerful women in Celtic culture were much more equal than they were in, say, like contemporaneous Roman culture. It wasn't a matriarchy, but it was much more equitable and women were understood and the sacred feminine was valued. So I have some priestesses up the line, you know, and so this year I've really been putting some intention into connecting with that lineage, my lineage. And where up the line do I have healthy and well ancestors who were working with the energy of the land, and what was their particular modality for doing that? I'm curious about those tools.
See, there's so many things that you've said that I'm like, yeah, I want to go back to that. I mean, maybe there need to be some editing.
Just go back to it right now.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about the vision that we have for like a space for people to come and find some healing and some reconnection or whatever it is that they need, quiet time. You know, when you use the word medicine, like to me that means so many things, right? Just coming out to the woods is medicine. Just coming out and sitting by a creek or a river and listening, sitting around a fire and listening. Like, you don't have to put anything else in your body. Mm-hmm. You can just do that and be with folks who are there to support you and love you, or be alone if that's what you're looking for. To write, to sing, to play music. I mean, there's so many things out there that I believe just different forms of medicine. Mm. Have you found that in these journeys, like different forms that have helped you outside of the plants?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it as my life is my art. So it's really how you do anything is how you do everything. And yeah, I mean, drawing for a minute now has been sort of a tool that I've used to calm myself down. I think as a kid, it was a way to channel the vortex, channel the fire. I drew all the time. And kind of in my early 20s, when other things were not working very well, I didn't draw at all. And that's partly because I was grinding pretty hard in the Matrix. I was working as a nanny and theoretically auditioning for theater in New York City, but I was mostly working. Some days I would have 3 jobs, just grinding all day so that I could pay my bills. So I literally didn't have the time and space, but then I think also, especially maybe living in the Matrix of New York, I just adopted a lot of external expectations about what art looks like and what's valuable, and I wasn't capable of it. Mm-hmm. So I pretty much stopped doing it. I just was judging what was coming out of me so hard. And yeah, once again, like medicine really reconnected me to play as really what we're all doing here in this dimension. Like, hey, we've been gifted these meat bodies and we get to experience this realm, you know? It's kind of why VR is so funny to me. Like, I don't feel any real call to it beyond sort of just basic curiosity about what it is. Because I'm like, we're in the VR. This is the VR. You know, and thinking that the VR inside the VR is going to be so much more pleasurable than this VR is just another form of escaping what actually is. So, yeah, all that is to say that drawing has become a way for me to just, at any time, wherever I am, anchor into that play spirit. And that's helped me at innumerable parties where I may be not connecting with what's going on, or situations where I would be like paralyzed with anxiety. Now I invite in cannabis and I have a pad of paper on my lap and I draw. And I can talk to people while that's happening, but it just gives me something to like channel my life force and my heart into. And it's been sort of the way that I've offered that space to other people for a long time too, just saying, hey, do you want a piece of paper? Or just not even giving them a chance, just pushing it in front of them and setting them up some pens and letting people kind of doodle in spite of themselves sometime. It's really fun to give people that permission, for there to be no expectation and for it to just be about, how does this feel? People think that they can't, in the same way that for years I carried the idea that I can't sing. Now it's like, I can sing clearly. I have a voice and sounds come out of me. How does it feel? What do I want? It can be really self-soothing, which is something I did as a kid. I remember in the backyard I would swing on my swing set for just, who knows, an infinite time, just swinging and singing this handful of songs over and over and over again to myself, which was a really good way of self-soothing, and also just, you know, it's magical to feel your generative power in that way. So I'm living more from that place now on a day-to-day basis, trying to.
Yeah, I love that idea of you singing as a child. I know we talked about that. I used to do the same. I'd open the window to the bathroom, because I shared a room with my brother, so I didn't have my own room ever. You go to the bathroom, actually, to kind of get away, and I remember opening the window and singing out the window, looking at the stars. We had a field behind our house, and yeah, just look up and sing and think like, I think somebody out there can hear this.
Makes me think of that little mouse in Five Goes West, like, somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, that was it. Oh yeah, I was singing that without a doubt. I mean, it's taken me a long time to get to that place too, where I feel again in my life comfortable singing and playing music again, like I used to play when I was younger. And something that you were just talking about, with this need to draw, this need to like get things out as like a support system, you've definitely shown that to me. I feel like I want to join you all the time because it looks fun. It looks like a meditation. And kids too. I love seeing our nieces and nephews jump on board immediately. Like, it's so natural for them to want to make stuff, you know. Let's put something together. Let's use our imaginations. That's been so crucial for me in the last 2 years. Spending all this time around you is seeing that I can tap into that, and that brings about a lot of healing.
That's such a universal story I hear with people, like so much of healing from any kind of trauma, but really just the trauma of growing up in this culture for so many people at whatever point this happens is about, remembering that we all know how to do all of this. And so many people are like, oh yeah, when I was a kid in my backyard, like I talked to trees, I talked to the roly-poly bugs. It's funny, the other day I asked my sister, my niece is 3, and so I asked her if she would ask my niece if she remembers where she was before she was born. So I was like, she's just at that point where she's articulate enough, but close enough to the veil, you know? And my sister reported back, she said that, yeah, Ella said that she was in the sun waiting to come here. And then my sister said, was anybody there with you? And she said, Theo, who's her brother. And my sister said, anybody else? And she said, no, just Theo. So, like, kids are more freshly arrived to this incarnation, like more aware of the gift of exploring this thing, I think. And they know that it is magic to be able to make stuff and talk to spirits. And I think that's pretty universal, and it gets baked out of us in the schooling system and in capitalism. But that saved my life. That got me out of, the depression that accompanied the drinking and just kind of the despair of my early 20s. Like, coming back into my power as a creator made this whole thing worth it and made me want to, like, stick around as long as I possibly can. If I go tomorrow, like, so grateful for the time that I've had. But I also, like, I'm in the middle of making some cool shit. I want to see it through.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
We're all artists. We're all creators. Culture has sold us this idea that there's like a career path called the artist that some people are good at. Fuck that.
Exclusive club.
Yeah. What that tells me is that there's somebody that's making money off of creating a door to that club and charging admission.
Yeah, letting kids know that there is no admission price. It's free. And when I say kids, I mean all of us.
Right, yeah. Because they know, the little kids know.
Yeah, they're totally more aware. They haven't been stored up with all this baggage. I think they see us right to the core. It's a lot like, animals that you have around too that love you unconditionally. It's like they are...
Yeah. They're pretty in the moment.
They're in the moment, yeah. And I think observing animals and plants is a big teacher. Where do we go from here?
Up. We go up.
It's been a wild year. It's been a year of a lot of shifts and a good bit of darkness. And it still feels like, who knows what's on the other side. It feels like so many things are at stake. It can be really unsettling to think about the future living here. How are you feeling about moving forward? Like, how do you feel about what's at stake right now, and that what we as people who are in a place of privilege, who are in a place of having able bodies, functioning bodies, how can we be a service? Like, how do we move forward and not allow things to go backwards again?
I mean, we saw Jeanette in Georgia last weekend when we went to film. She hit it on the head, I think, when we were talking about this. She said it's about your relationships. Yeah, I'm just learning that the way forward is to manifest all the stuff that I want to see in the world, quote unquote, in my immediate world. And that means in relationship with everybody that I'm dealing with, even people who I don't feel super aligned with. Like, I don't go out of my way to make space for those people, but like when I bump up against them, it's like, how do I be in this relationship in a way where I'm showing up with the integrity that I want to see in the world around me in all ways. So I don't know. I think everybody's feeling this right now with the coronavirus situation. I think a lot of people are like looking much more micro at their immediate surroundings and what they actually have agency over, which is of course only ever ourselves, and how to emanate what I want to see, and let myself be challenged and grow through all of those relationships too. I'm not a big prognosticator. Like, I don't live in the future. If I am going to dwell someplace, it's usually in the past. Like, I like to try and really get the story straight of what happened back up the line and what that means for me now. The best place to be is in the present moment where there are no stories, but that's where I get caught when I get caught. The future, I'm just like, I don't know, and I don't want to put a lot of energy into building up a future hypothetical, that then is like competing for space in my consciousness with what's actually happening. It just feels like a waste of time for me to invest a lot into a hypothetical situation. That time will come when it comes, and I trust myself to respond in that moment. That's actually a big something I got from ayahuasca. I got the message, don't rehearse. You don't need to rehearse. I don't rehearse even what might be like a high pressure moment where I want to perform well. The way to prepare for that is to prepare my body to do the things that I need to do so that I feel strong, so that I can be centered. It means eating a great breakfast or going for a run or writing in my journal, whatever it is. It's like prepare myself to show up the best that I can. But like I don't try to prepare storylines or go over what I'm going to say or do anymore, because it takes all the fun out of it, and it totally discredits the person that I'm going to show up as in the future. I trust that person. She's badass. She's going to do it. And I'm going to just be right here because this is where I actually am right now. So all that is to say, like, I've really been bringing that perspective to the energy of crisis from this current moment too. I think it's really tempting to try to predict where things are going, but I don't know. And this moment is like wild enough. So that's been helping me, I think, not panic, not go down spiral panics of what could be. And I want to shout out all of our friends and lovers that have kids. I think it's different when people feel responsible for little human bodies. Mm-hmm. I know that brings a whole nother level of future fears and worries and intentions. So I want to honor that.
Yeah.
But something else that's been giving me a lot of credit is just checking in deeply with our ancestors, recent ancestors who dealt with like really serious crisis in their lifetime. Yes, the particular things that are happening in 2020 in this moment are unique to this moment, but they're not. The crisis and the struggle that we're in now is not unique. And by thinking that we're so special and this is such a crazy year, we're cutting ourselves off from a huge lineage of wisdom and resources of how people have dealt with this in the past. There are so many great examples from the civil rights movement, from how people recovered from the Great Depression, from what happened after apartheid in South Africa or during apartheid, how people survived slavery. Like, there are tools, and there have been amazingly creative and brave humans that I think, again, our culture likes to think they're heroes and single people that stood out and created movements. That's not true. It's a bunch of people tapping into their potential to be the hero, for lack of a better word, and we all need to own that right now and know that we're capable of that, of showing up to the world the way that we want everybody to show up. That's the only way this is going to happen. And that's what the powers that be want to keep us from realizing. In intentional ways, of course, that I think we're very aware of how divisive, particular administrations and policies are. But I think in a much more general, less like directly nefarious way, like phone addiction. Everybody I know is addicted to their phone in a very real way that is affecting their life, that's affecting their joy, that's affecting their ability to be present with the people that are actually around them. Like, that is stealing so much of our life force and our energy. And I'm really proud of and inspired by and like getting on board with people who are like, I'm being very intentional right now about not engaging with that, with my phone, with the internet, with social media for periods of time. I think there's a good chance that enough of us are distracted enough by our phones and by virtual world that we're not going to show up to this one in a way that is necessary for real change and manifestation in this realm. It's a great distraction.
Yeah, and it's really tough when you can't go be with your community too.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's where it can get really dark for a lot of folks, is if we turn to our phones and we turn to screen time all the time, mm-hmm. and not real touch and not real community, because we literally can't, or we're being forced away from that. That's extremely difficult to live in that space all the time. And I'm saying that because I've experienced that.
Me too. Yeah.
Myself, and I know you have too. It can lead to some really rough spaces to try and dwell
That's where
from.
we were laughing the other day after just like you know, I mean, we call it touches, where like we'll have maybe like an intentional cannabis ceremony, or no cannabis, but just like touch each other literally, and then also like having sex, but just realizing orgasm is psychedelic. It is like you disappear into the void of like not having to bear the burden of being a person for a little bit, but just communing with that part of another person, being that intimate with another person is like, we need it. We're designed for it. It's a huge part of our well-being. Yeah, I have so much compassion for people that are alone physically or emotionally, or are in cages right now. And I mean, that's a huge part of the energy that needs to be righted in the world right now, is all the ways that we're kept separate from one another and keeping ourselves separate. Yeah.
I see how much you write people. You know, you're sending out packages, letters, like every other day, it seems like, and communicating with folks that way, with sending them art, things that you just made yesterday and it's already on its way to someone. There's so many ways to stay connected, and hopefully if we are doing those things during this time, we're rallying our spirits to when we can physically come together in these really big ways, which it seems like we need to. Seems like folks that align themselves with each other, we need to find each other. And we are.
Which is happening.
It's happening.
Yeah, I feel it.
It's happening.
And everybody seems to be, you know, when we talk about our vision for land and a place where people can have respite and reconnection to themselves and nature.
So many folks want
all
that.
of our friends want that. Everybody's trying to figure out how to swing it with resources and, you know, getting less and less invested in the matrix. So, I mean, I trust that it's underway.
Yeah, it's not about getting lost, too. I'm not trying to run away from the city. I like the idea of being just outside of a city where people can come and be a part of finding some freedom, finding some space. And I feel that energy all around right now with a lot of folks talking in this way of, hey, I'm not running away. I'm not trying to isolate. I'm trying to create a space where people can be a part of this and they can feel the freedom to let go of some of the machine.
Yeah, we're just seeing the effects so clearly of how the machine is breaking us all down. So people are getting serious about what we're going to do instead.
You know, you've been a part of making several films at this point, and you and I are working on a film. And why has that been a medium for you that just feels right?
It's funny because sometimes I'm like, is this medium right? Do I believe in interfacing through screens?
Yeah.
But
well, I'll just say that I don't just see it through the podcast episodes, how well you hold space for folks, how well you listen. I see it when we're out just filming with strangers, and how you open that door for folks. As you mentioned earlier, that you are finding ways to be able to just look right into someone's heart, and at the same time allowing them the freedom to see that you're just there with them, and they can be themselves, that you see them as you.
Well, I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. Like, I hope that can be the transmission of the films that I make, is just showing anybody that watches it that it's possible to connect with people that way and what it feels like. Because it's so much more simple, I think, sometimes than we think. You know, I've also, in my production life, when I was being paid to produce things for other people, I would be in these situations where you've got a person in the room with 5 cameras and they, like, move the chair to the middle of the room so that the lights can be on, and you get people so like amped up and self-conscious and under the microscope in these situations, and then turn the camera on and want them to spill their guts. Like, that's just not how it's an environment that you create with your energy toward that person, and all things, like the way that you film them in a room. My approach to that is like, where are they? Okay, then that's where I'm going to be. And that doesn't mean I don't want things to like look good and be intentional, but again, it's that idea of like working with the circumstances rather than thinking that I know best by like coming into a space and being like, here's my vision and here's how I'm going to set all this up. It's like, what's here? What's awaiting me? How can I play in this space? And I really approach any kind of collaboration with someone as like, This is an invitation where I'm being invited into something, and I'm going to approach it with that kind of respect that I'm a guest here. And yeah, it's just fun to ask questions of people that are willing to dance, are willing to play. It's so fun, and I think the secret ingredient that I hope comes through in the films is that it just takes a willingness to be there with people. I would get in trouble if I showed up as like, I am the director and I'm here to interview you and you are the subject. It's just like, no, we're hanging out. And that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I definitely felt that when we were filming Surviving America. Your openness with these men who sometimes are difficult to be around, you know, and you reminded me so many times that, hey, we don't need to set anything up. We just need to turn the camera on and be with them. It's powerful because we end up becoming friends with these folks. We end up spending time with them off camera because it just feels right to be with them, to love on them after you hear what they've been through and how they're loving on us. You know, they're opening up to us, and they can't believe that we want to talk to them, which is so odd, right? It's like to have someone say, like, I can't believe you're talking to me. It's like, what? Why can't we talk? You know, why is it so strange?
It's such a simple gift to be able to give and receive, you know? It's literally just about time and presence, and that is something that we always have everywhere, wherever we are, no matter what's happening. That doesn't mean I'm always in that mode. Like, I definitely take time to, like, as you know, like, hardcore close the doors sometime and just, like, regenerate and be with myself. It's just so fun because it's like when you're making things, again, with the podcast or with filming, it's just an excuse to enter that space of sharing with people, of seeing each other in a real way. And it's like, when would I have ever gotten to spend time with guys like this who have had this kind of life experience? And I could see it in them, of them being like this, you know, 30-something-year-old woman who, like, wants to talk to us, and we can't flirt with, or we can flirt with her, but, like, it's not a sexual thing. We're just, like, talking to a woman who just wants to talk to us as another human being. Like, I get that a lot in the South, period. Like, I get that a lot of men down here are surprised to just have, like, a transparent conversation with a woman about real stuff. Sadly, I don't think that happens a ton in Southern culture. And that's kind of fun to just, like, come down here and just be with people.
Yeah, I can see it all over them in those moments. How surprising and good it is for them, for their spirit, to be able to have an open conversation with a woman, transparency with someone that you've just met, you know, who happens to be a woman, you know, if you're a white male especially.
And I get saved from my own bullshit. Like, instead of being in my head with my stories about what I think is going on, I get to actually be with a human in the world.
And a lot of these men were, I mean, they're elders. I mean, they're 60 to 85. I mean,
although I don't think that all old people are elders either.
Yes, I understand that.
But yeah.
I understand that, but we definitely met a few men.
Absolutely.
A few men that had quite a bit of wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
And to be able to see them as that, teachers, and let them know that too. Like, hey, you have a lot of wisdom to pass on, and I appreciate that. Like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to listen and learn, and in the doing of that, I began to love some of them, you know?
Yeah, I think documentary filmmaking is such a... I mean, it's funny during COVID, like, I get the sense that a lot of people are watching Netflix, and a lot of people are, I think, watching documentaries with an intention to learn, which is awesome. And I think they can do that. I think they can also be a psychedelic experience. The way that the film is made is just as important to the storytelling as the content of the story, so that you enter the experience somatically. I mean, those are the films that have changed my life, are those kind of deeply immersive films where you experience another reality. And that's the way that you change hearts. I think certainly people can learn intellectually through films. Like in vegan circles, I hear a lot of times a couple films named that I've never seen, but I know that people are like, this changed the way that I think, or this is what I tell people to watch to change their minds, and that's great. Like, information is really important, real information. But I think what really seals the deal and, like, changes behavior and changes patterns in relationships is through the heart portal. And films can do that. I remember watching Grizzly Man for the first time and just like my head exploding.
Yeah, same.
Like, this is possible.
Just really being with folks. Like, no matter how wild and crazy they are, no matter how awkward they are, that you might be feeling in that moment, like, just cut, go to another person, nope, here we are. We're going to hang in there and listen to this person for a while. And they don't look like the hero. They don't look like the stereotypical person that you're always seeing on a screen. That's profound. Those documentaries really saved me in a lot of ways.
And like that one, for example, you're hanging out with Timothy Treadwell in these really intimate, like he thinks he's making a video blog for himself out in the middle of the wilderness talking to bears. Like the scene where he discovers the bear poop and like he goes over and he's so emotional about it being warm still because it came out of his favorite bear. Like to see people's... I mean, it's so funny. Like, there are so many fucking hilarious moments, but it's funny because you recognize, like, shit, that's me when I'm in my alone space, when I'm in relationship with myself. It's so funny to see that brought to the surface of collective consciousness and just to recognize, like, how silly we all are and how human. And
that we have to acknowledge that when we're watching it. Whether we're willing to talk about it in that moment.
That's me.
Yeah, whether you're willing to admit that or not, but somewhere deep inside you're like, I do some of that shit. I do things like that.
You have your own version of that. Like, what's sacred to you inside your own internal world. Like bear poop. Yeah.
Yeah, and films that show you a completely different culture, a reality-shifting form of expression. It's almost like when the film's over, you're completely different. Mm-hmm. It's like you just woke up as another person, which I guess I could equate that sort of like to psychedelics. Just kind of waking up on the other side with just a new... Just
the idea of judging somebody else's life just being so hilariously ridiculous. Just
ridiculous. Like, why would I do that?
Who are you?
Why would I... Yeah. I can remember being in a mushroom trip once, and I just started laughing so hard about music. I think there was like a song playing, like maybe somebody put on a song that in the beginning of hearing that song I might go like, like this. But in that realm I was like, why would I judge anyone for making music? Whatever comes out of them, like why do I care? So like I should just be happy that they're doing it. I'm gonna sit here and shit talk like this thing that you spent so much energy to express that means something so deep to you and also just came out of you. I'm not doing it. Who am I over here? I'm not expressing myself in that way, and here I'm gonna judge that so harshly. Like that just makes so little sense.
Although I will say what is hard to hear, as you know, during psychedelic trips is like music that's come out of the machine, that's designed by the machine. Like if Taylor Swift comes on when you're tripping, you're like, all I hear is like exploitation and like cha-ching, cha-ching. And you can hear the energy with which the transmission comes through. So when it comes from a person's soul, you hear that, and that's what matters.
Or I guess being around live music too. Like someone playing live when you're on psychedelics. I mean, you could be sitting around a fire. You could be in a living room with someone. You could be at a festival. There's not one way, but I'm just saying, like,
you're like, that's coming out of you for me to enjoy.
Wow. Like, why would I ever judge what's coming out of you? Why would I be like, oh, I can't believe you played that chord right now. I can't believe you're playing that drum or you're singing right now. Like,
what are we doing
judge
here?
That. So I started doing that a little bit. Yeah. I started singing a little more. But I don't have any judgment about it anymore. I'm not judging myself, based on what I think everyone else is expecting of me.
Woohoo!
That's been a tough one. So many attachments.
I like that you said that, what you think everyone else is expecting of you too, because that's the thing. It's like, sure, maybe there are humans out there that want a certain thing, but what actually matters is your perception of it and you allowing those things to be true or real. But for the most part, we don't know what other people think, and for the most part, other people are thinking about themselves. So I definitely had that experience in ayahuasca of realizing that I had this peanut gallery inside me that was just judging the shit out of everything, and I was like, this is this is my imagination. I'm letting these people sit in these bleachers in my imagination. It's just like, kick these guys out of here.
Yeah. And so many musicians for me that kind of showed me a new path were the ones that said, hey, I do this for me because I need to get this out. And if you feel a connection to it and you want to get on board with this, awesome. But I'm not making this to cater to anyone. This is not about what anybody else wants. This is what's coming out of me. And, a lot of that shifted for me when I began listening to soul music. It just stirred me in a way that I'd never experienced before, because it was like, this clearly has to come out of this person. Mm-hmm. You hear it and feel it in that way. You see it. Meaning, like, you can close your eyes and you can just see the emotion, the drive to let it out, is so like strong that it's not possible to hold it back. Mm-hmm. Now I can't listen to music the same way anymore. I can't, songs that were so catchy to me maybe when I was younger that I kind of got hooked on the sort of like candy pop machine. It's like, oh man, it sounds great, but a lot of it wasn't doing a whole lot for me in terms of stirring my heart to do any sort of action that was positive. And all of a sudden folks like, Bobby Womack or Sam Cooke or, Bob Marley or Otis Redding or Nina Simone, Curtis Mayfield for sure, a lot of Curtis.
Mavis Staples.
Mavis Staples, the Staples singers, her entire family. This is like pure expression right here, coming from such a deep source. And I can access that too. That's inside of me too. And sort of like Mavis Staples says, like, love is the only communication where it's like we totally can find each other. We can all reach common ground if we meet each other with love. And I'd love to hear you sing, by the way. It's been really beautiful to hear you sing in different ceremonies and sometimes when we're just alone.
We all get on the same wavelength together. We really feel our capacity as humans. It's really powerful to all focus it on the same energy point. I think that's part of what's so psychedelic about this time right now too, is we're all kind of focused and paused on the few same things. The pandemic, Black Lives Matter, we're in this collective pause together and we're all feeling the latency of our attention, the latency of our power in our attention.
Yeah, and it's no wonder that when different artists have throughout time in these kind of wild situations have come forth and rallied people and said, we're gonna unify in this collective way that says, enough is enough, or we're gonna meet all this hatred with love. We're gonna meet it with acceptance, dancing, holding each other, like just being together, collectively saying, this is what matters. Watching whoever's on the stage connect with whoever's out in the audience, like it just becomes one. It's a very psychedelic thing, yeah. It's very magical. I'm so ready for that to come back.
Good.
Is there like a thing we should try to close it out?
Like, rate, and subscribe. Well, I just want to send out blessings of groundedness and gratitude for people that are listening right now. I guess the idea for this conversation was kind of motivated by this being the 2-year anniversary of starting this project. And I started it as like a note to self of being like, I need to feel okay. And this is how I'm going to do that, figure that out. And such a really beautiful thing for the podcast to create community. I'm just really grateful for people that have taken the time to go on the journey with me for different periods. Yeah, it's just really cool. I make this thing and send it out into the world and just trust that it will find the people that it needs to find. And just, thank you. Thank you. Thank you that's listening. You're not alone. Even in the hard stuff and the scary stuff. I remember that everything that I've felt has been felt by many, many people before me. And there is a possibility for love and growth and connection, even when I forget the path. I'm so grateful for the ways the universe has reminded me that there's always the possibility for new energy and magic, and we are all supported deeply by the Creator that sent us here, and by many other spirits in physical incarnation and otherwise who have our best, our well-being as their mission too, and who know how hard it is to be human, like how wild it is. Maybe that's a good thing to close on, is I'll share an experience that I had in a mushroom journey recently, where I was doing the thing where I lay down and I get in the spaceship. And I've had several experiences now in the medicine that have told me that if I do that, I can go hang out with some guides that can't take form in this physical dimension, but will meet me on one that I can reach through mushrooms, and they can come down into. So I got in the spaceship, and something that I'd really been working on is all the ways that I catch myself numbing out, like I was saying, maybe using food to do that, or just ways that I get overwhelmed by the world, by all the feelings, the too muchness of the world, and put up protective barriers. And I was like, I want to feel. I don't want to numb out. I want to feel this experience. And I know that feeling is the keyhole through which I can manifest the things that I care about, the love that I want to put in the world. So going into that, these teachers and the mushrooms, they were like, okay, we'll show you how to feel. And they just like took off every shield that I have, and my whole body became like one raw nerve, basically. And I was just completely overwhelmed with the sensation of the human experience. I went like down deeply inside of one person, and I saw the depth, just the infinite depth of experience that one person experiences in one lifetime. The massive amount of heartbreak and pain and fear and joy and ecstasy and meaning. And then I zoomed out and I saw like all humans that are alive right now, and all humans through time that have ever existed. Just the impossible amount of stuff, of experience, of emotion. And it showed me that. And then it said, you chose this. You chose to come to this realm where this is the currency. And it, out of like the periphery of my vision, from each side came these two massive galaxies coming towards each other. And one of them was love and joy and connection, and the other one was suffering. And these two galaxies that were also sort of atoms at the same time came closer and closer and closer. And the teachers were like, the human incarnation in this realm that you understand as reality is about the combination of these two things, these two universes colliding, suffering and the love. They're inextricable in this dimension. And the two universes, the two galaxies, the two atoms crash together. And in that like sort of atomic explosion, I like slipped into consciousness. That was me being like born into this body, this incarnation, this reality. And I didn't invent this idea. I don't think this is the first time teachers have taught this transmission. Like, that is the idea that this human realm is defined by suffering. But it showed me that I'm not a victim of my life. You know, I chose this life. I chose to be here. I chose to learn through the portals of suffering in combination with love. And this sort of heartbreaking ecstasy of that we dance with every day is not, there's nothing wrong. That's not something to be like avoided or fixed. Like, that's what we're doing here. That's what I'm doing here, is like experiencing humanness. It's hard. It's fucking hard to continue to show up in a realm that has suffering baked into it. It's really hard to show up every day, every moment. But the invitation is for us to make the meaning in that, to seek the good, the love, the joy, to manifest that, to invest that with just as much life force as the suffering we experience. And it's hard. I know it's hard, and I see people, And I love them for continuing to show up to this contract that we're in. And I'm really honored to be with people in this shared hallucination that we know of as reality.
I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So glad to be here with you.
Thank you for listening and supporting and loving and trusting me.
You've made it really easy. And when it's hard, it's still okay. At the end of the day, it feels true.